Please be seated. As we begin today, I want to check, did anybody not have a chance to pick up an index card and a pen? Raise your hand if you don't have one. I think Bob and looks like Patty's going to help out too. If you can leave your hand raised as I begin, and Bob and Patty, thank you, will make sure you have those. You'll need them in a minute. So I have to start by telling you a little bit about my mother. My mother is a good Christian woman and therefore has some pretty clear standards and morals. As a kid, we were never allowed to wear pants to church. Just wasn't done as a lady. There was also some language that we were not allowed to use in our house, and I have these vague memories of my mother threatening my sister with a wooden spoon as a child. I don't think she ever actually used the spoon, but I remember that threat there. And luckily, my sisters were 7, 8 years older than me, so I learned what not to do through them. One of the things my mother was hung up on when I was a little kid was not to use certain language. One of those words included the word suck. You could not say, "That sucks." There's probably a couple of you right now that are cringing yourself, I'm sure. The funny thing, though, is that now my mother freely uses that word herself. Times change. Now, there's other words that work at times. Like if you go into the ice cream shop and it doesn't have your mint cookies and cream that you've been craving all week, you can say, well, that's a bummer, and it works, right? But if your best friend dies at the age of 35, leaving behind a 2-year-old child, what word holds the emotion? That sucks. Pretty much does it. So I asked ChatGPT, for better or worse, trying to come up with some alternatives to the word suck. And sometimes they work, but sometimes they don't. Here were some of the top alternatives for direct and common usage. That's a bummer, or that's unfortunate, that's a shame, or that's disappointing. Again, sometimes will work, sometimes just does not hold it. Now, if you're writing professional email to your boss, it suggests that you say things like this. This is not ideal. This is challenging. That is regrettable. Or this is frustrating. Yeah, probably a better choice of words for your boss, but you know what you're saying to your coworker is something different. And in the more strong, aggressive alternatives, ChatGPT offers is, that's dreadful. Just doesn't cut it. This is a disaster. This stinks. And that's wretched. Maybe getting there on that one. The point is, sometimes the realities of life are awful. And there just is not enough English language to really express the emotions that we feel. Even saying that sucks might not be enough. And this is one of the reasons why I love the psalm that we read today. It's the most depressing psalm, I would say, of all of the Psalter, and yet I love it. See, Psalm 88 is the only lament in all of the Psalter that does not have at some point in it, "But God, I know you're sovereign," or "and yet I will trust in you." There's no sense of trust necessarily in this one lament. Every other lament has something. The truth is, sometimes when we are in the pit of despair, even uttering words of trust may seem impossible. And yet, here it is in the Psalter. It's as if God is giving us permission to say sometimes, "God, this sucks. Why, God? Why?" God is saying sometimes life is that awful. And so I will give you the language to try to express that anguish. And yet, even with that, even with the fact that this psalm has no thin lining of hope in the midst of it, if you realize that Psalm 88 does not sit by itself, but it was intentionally put in this section of the Psalter, with Psalm 87 on one side and 89 on the other. Psalm 87 basically being this great shout of joy over Zion, the promised land, the promised idea of life as it is meant to be, shalom. There's this joy of leaning into that promise in Psalm 87. And then Psalm 89 is all about praising God's steadfast love. So even when we are in the pit of despair, we are part of something bigger, and those that can hold on to the joy and the trust in God's sovereign love can come around us and embrace us and hold us and sit with us in that pit for as long as we need to sit there. This season, we have been exploring the concept of lament, this idea that we don't always need to come to church with a happy face on. That we can come to church, and we should, because if we can't do it here, where can we do it? Where we can say, you know what, life is not good for me right now. And where we can come around each other, and we can embrace one another, we can pray for one another until we ourselves are ready to pray again. And so today, I invite us to take just a brief moment, to take your index card and a pen that hopefully works, because not all of them do, to write down something that is weighing you down, something that is currently making you say, God, why? Or, God, this sucks. What is it? It could be something going on in your own life, something going on in the life of someone you love, or something that you observe when you watch the news at night. What is it that is weighing you down? What is it that makes you cry out, why? Take a moment, write it down, keep it anonymous, and then we're going to collect them at the end of the sermon during the time of silence, and they're going to sit up here on the altar through communion. When we have communion, we are invited to come forward with all that we have and all that we are, and that includes all that's weighing us down. That includes our laments. Even our laments are welcomed here. And so I ask you to do that, and then Wednesday evening when we have our prayer service of lament, those prayers will be prayed for. Those prayers will be lifted up to God, because only God can handle them. But God surely can. So take a moment and write them down. I'll give you just a few more seconds for now. If your pen wasn't working or behaving, or if you'd rather wait till later, after the service, you can still bring the cards forward so they can be a part of Wednesday's service. So before we conclude today, I just want to share a couple of last thoughts from our readings that we had today. And first is a sign of hope. The first is saying that we are invited to follow Jesus and live in this threshold place where on one hand We can hold all that pains us, all of the laments of the world, and yet on the other hand, lean into that promise of life everlasting. I find it interesting that Jesus today, when he's at the tomb of Lazarus, does not enter into the tomb, but it's as if he's standing on the threshold. On one hand, here he is weeping. And I don't think Jesus is just a couple of tears coming down. I have a feeling at this point, it's an ugly cry. It is all full-on emotion. And I think what he is feeling in this moment is not just simply grief. In fact, we had a little debate this last Wednesday of even what it meant that Jesus was feeling despair. The English translators can't even agree on how to translate this word from Greek because it can be a whole breadth of emotions. And I think the reality is Jesus probably was feeling a whole lot of emotions in this moment. He was feeling the energy, the pain of his friends who were weeping the loss of their loved one. And so he was feeling that grief himself. He was feeling despair, seeing the realities of life, that death is something that exists. He was feeling probably a bit of frustration, being like, come on, guys. You've been with me how long, and you still don't seem to get it. You don't seem quite to understand what it is I'm doing. So he probably had a little bit of frustration there. And he probably had a bit of doubt, wondering himself, the fully human part of this fully God, fully human incarnation, probably had a bit of doubt, being like, did I wait too long? Should I have come earlier? Coulda, woulda, shoulda. Jesus in this moment is feeling all of these emotions. All of this is burdening him, weighing him down as he stands at the threshold of the tomb. And yet, on the other hand, here's Jesus looking death in the face and saying, you have no power here. I can almost hear Jesus laugh, saying to death, you think you won? You ain't seen nothing yet. This is just the beginning. Jesus can hold both of these two things at once, the despair and the truth of life eternal. And that's what lamenting is sometimes for us, holding on to the despair and holding on to the hope simultaneously, not saying one should be ignored for the other, but holding them both. And that's where we are invited to stand also. But then there is more to what we ourselves are invited to do and be if we look at our readings today. Our first reading, Ezekiel, I like to call him Zeke. I hope he doesn't mind. Here he is standing in front of a mass grave. The grief he must have been feeling, whether it was literal or just a vision, he was seeing all of these bodies who were not properly buried. A mass grave, all of this death and destruction. And here in the midst of it, he is the one called to prophesy new life out of death. He is the one invited to be part of bringing this resurrection to life. And then similarly with Lazarus, Jesus is the one who calls Lazarus out of the tomb, but Jesus then says to the crowd, you unbind him, you set him free. You bring him back into the community where he belongs. We are not simply receivers of eternal life. We are called to participate in the active resurrection of life, one with another, all the time. We are called to make it real, to make it tangible. And so when one of us is sitting in the pit of despair, the others are called to come around, to sit with, and when ready, to help them come out and unbind them and free them to live more fully into this life eternal. Next week begins Holy Week. It's the one week of the year where I think Christians have this tendency to want to cry out more than ever, God, this sucks. There will be more ugly crying this week in church than any other time of the year as we journey once again with Jesus through his last week, through his murder, but then also rejoice with him in his resurrection. God is willing and chooses to stand in front of the mass graves and to stand at the tombs of death. God is willing to give the ultimate ugly cry over all of the emotions, the harsh realities of this world. And with all of that, to laugh joyfully, to once again lean into that promise that death does not get the last word, that God is the resurrection and God is life. Amen.